self-determination for peoples, universal free, non-militaristic education, reform of taxation, and by 1919 in Manchester, they were supporting women workers who had been thrown out of jobs as the men returned home. Throughout the 20s and the 30s, Wilpf organized peace pilgrimages, crusades, petitions in an attempt to stop another war. After World War II, Wilpf was one of the first organizations opposing nuclear weapons from the very beginning. And in the year 2000, with other NGOs, Wilpf worked successfully to get the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325, Women, Peace and Security, calling for women to have a greater role in conflict resolution and peace negotiation and constitution writing. And you'll hear more about that. Wilpf has a great history, which we can be rightly proud, but we're not just history. Sadly, we still have a patriarchal society based on militarism, and only 34% of members of parliament are women, and even less of heads of state. So we have a long way to go towards a fair and equitable society. Like the early women, we still work in networks of men and women working for peace, working to preserve the environment and for trade justice and human rights. But we find we still have to introduce a feminist analysis in all these issues and into the statements which are produced by our colleagues and friends in these networks. Wilpf now has sections in all continents and over 30 countries. Our holistic approach to peace, to national and international issues, as it's important now as it was any time in our 105 years history. You hear shortly about our current campaigns, which show the links between women, peace, security, climate change, the environment, weapons and disarmament, and women's economic position. Wilpf is still here, we're still needed, we're still relevant, and we're still looking for women to join us.
Thank you very much, Sheila, as always. Thank you very much. Again, if you have any questions for Sheila, just pop them in the chat, and Emily will be collecting them. It always makes me quite emotional to hear the story. Second up is our Taniel. As mentioned earlier, she is a job share to Wilpf International, and she'll be talking to us about disarmament and feminist economics. So Taniel, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Cecilia. Thank you, Sheila. I agree. It's always really moving to hear that. I went a little cold when I saw the pictures of Congress, and I was a member of International Wilpf before I joined UK Wilpf, which is sort of a backward way of doing it. And I first met Sheila at The Hague at the Centennial, where we all gathered as the 100-year later Wilpf women. So it's an extraordinary story. I'm going to talk quickly because I want to give you the opportunity to ask any questions, and I, unfortunately, because of the times we're in and time changes, I do have to be off at 6. But it was funny when Cecilia introduced and said it's a mouthful of things that Taniel does. And actually, I think it speaks to the work that Wilpf does and the rather unique way I think we connect. We don't connect the dots, I think we complete the circle of the analysis, the correct analysis. And if you look at, as Sheila mentioned, the first document that Wilpf put together in 1915, then you look again at say the 1919 Triennial Congress, which is much more specific and detailed, because obviously they'd been in practice by then and they'd been working on things by then. They talk about free trade, they talk about equal access to raw materials. This was sophisticated stuff. And we're still talking about the same things, which is extraordinary and disheartening, but also it shows that they knew what they were talking about. So I will mention a few things and how they fit in, and then when you hear more about 1325 and climate work in detail, you'll see again how we're rounding these things together. So Wilpf, as Sheila said, has always been a disarmament movement. It's always been about, from the outset, it was the inclusion of women, but it was also peace in general, protecting those poor boys that were being sent off to war without a desire to do so. And that's an important distinction in this climate to make. I think that inclusion and fairness and justice and equality, there was an awareness of a kind of intersectional perspective, I think, before it was even articulated. So some of the things we worked on, just some of the highlights, we worked on the Arms Trade Treaty. And the important aspect of that is that it was adopted in 2013, and now a conference of states meets every year, and they review practices of regulation of the trading of arms, of what's traded, how it's used, the financing. And I remember a friend of mine saying, I lose sleep at night sometimes working on regulating a thing I want to get rid of, but it's the thin end of the wedge, and it's one of the things we can do now, and hopefully it's incremental change. And the thing that we did uniquely was to get gender onto that agenda, to get women recognized for the disproportionate harm that they receive, not just by arms, not just through the trafficking and the additional harms from domestic violence, from returning combatants and all of those things, but the actual trading of arms itself. So it's not just arms, it's the arms trade. It's not just where they go and the harms that they do. The actual supply chain of weapon systems is a toxic supply chain in itself, and disproportionately so for women. The treaty to prohibit nuclear weapons has to be mentioned. It's historic, it's important. Most people belligerently laughed in our faces and said it can't be done, it won't be done, and yet here it is. So the treaty to prohibit nuclear weapons, and I'm going to abbreviate it to the fun part, was adopted on the 7th of July in 2017. It was an overwhelming day. It was voted for with 122 votes for and 1 abstain, and 1 against, and the 1 against was the one that called for the vote, and that was the Netherlands. So it was more or less unanimous, which was a glorious moment, and we were on the edge of our seats waiting for that vote to come through, having thought it would be a consensus. So now that's on record, and the states that voted for it, we can, and we do lobby and say, well, remember, you're in that historical record, you voted for it. And later, on the 20th of September, the treaty was open for signature. There have been 38 ratifications, I believe, so far. And when we reach 50, it will enter into force, which is extraordinary. And they won't be able to laugh quite so much anymore. We work on munitions in small areas, lots of things to do with arms. And at the moment, one of the biggest and scariest things on the horizon is AI in the military. So imagine, and I'm slightly simplifying, you have a drone, and drones can drop missiles of various descriptions. But initially, the targeting and the selection process is performed by a human being. I'm sorry if you can hear the sirens outside. A human being in an area removed from the engagement at the other end. And the proposition is that technologies may be able to engage and select and carry out both the target through to the hit, utterly independent of a human being making any kind of selection, which we argue is both a violation of international humanitarian law, which which calls for the whole basis of international law is about accountability and states holding their combatants or commanders accountability. Well, if you don't have a chain of command, then who do you hold accountable? Who's going to Nuremberg for war crimes if you just say, well, the robots did it? It's a little more sophisticated than that, obviously, but that's one of the basic points. The fact that it's disproportionately harmful in terms of gender, there are all sorts of statistics about the fact that whether it's facial recognition, voice recognition, algorithms in technology that we see that are used now, they're used in finance, they're used in medicine, they're used in insurance decisions, are biased. They're biased against all sorts of things to do with programmers who input the data, but they're also unpredictable. Some bias can be eliminated, some, but it's still human nature and then replicated and exacerbated through a program which then sort of relearns on the information it's been given. But algorithms in themselves are unpredictable. They're complex systems, and in the noise and chaos of war create even more problems. So we are working extremely well on that. We've just become part of, well, we formed actually the UK campaign to stop killer robots to support the global campaign, and Wilpf, and I represent us in that campaign. Wilpf is instrumental in it. And I was in our interview for a grant application, and we bring the gendered perspective. And an important part of that is feminist economics, feminist political economy. We have our Move the Money campaign, which is move the money from war to peace. But it goes deeper than that. We work on we're consulting on the Business and Human Rights Treaty. But in terms of what can be done here, in terms of reconceptualizing the concept of security, it's about effective lobbying, not just around illicit financial flows and the sort of slavery and toxicity involved in the global supply chain and economic injustice, but it's actually enacting the laws that we do already have in some cases. The Equalities Act, it mandates all sorts of things. So does CEDAW, so does 1325, so do all sorts of our domestic laws. They're simply not carried out. If we have what we call disaggregated statistics, so instead of flattening statistics that just say, this year, say, GDP went up in this area, or a percentage of that went down. Well, went down by how much and for whom? So you can have a line that's like this, and then you look closer and closer and closer, and actually the line is like that. That's a little bit what demographic disaggregated statistics are. And without looking at that with things like gender budgeting, but for a real intersectional analysis, so it's not just women, obviously, there are people who are, for geographical reasons, a postcode lottery, they are supported less in terms of infrastructure for all sorts of reasons that are both historical and new. Understanding and burrowing down how current, past and potential policies can affect different demographics, either well or poorly, is really important, so you can have demographically responsive policies, and I call it first do no harm. And the reason that we follow the economics on this is because the economics is always the driving force, and when you take the money away, suddenly it loses its power. And nothing's been truer than that, as in it's happened with chemical weapons, for example. It's happened with other divestment campaigns, with the treaty to prohibit nuclear weapons, which they said they said it would have no effect because no big states are in it. Very shortly after, within hardly any ratifications, the biggest pension fund in the world, with I think it has $1 trillion in it, took everything nuclear off of its books. Now, hedge funds and fund managers, they look at that. They don't know anything about the TPNW. They're not looking at IHL or what happens at the UN, but they look at what big pension funds do. Deutsche Bank started removing some fission material from their books. Deutsche Bank is a big bank. It's not necessarily known for its ethical causes. So the money is power. It's powerful. And so, yes, I do some strange research on the ground, but it's actually interlocking these things. And I can go into more detail about some of that when I speak next week. But that's what Wilpf does, and that's what Wilpf believes in. that security isn't about military might, it's actually about stability and social security. That's them ringing through. So that no one needs to go to war to fight for resources. I'm going to have to go, but I hope that that was enough for you. So I'm going to sign off.
Thank you very much, Taniel. Thank you for staying a little bit over your time as well.
That's all right. I'm sorry I can't stay. I'm so sorry.
No,
everyone.
no, it's okay. It's okay. Thank you very much. Bye. We'll see you as you mentioned next week.
Yeah, and I can talk since I'm going to bring them back. I'll talk more about the rethinking security side and how those things link together, because, you know, the feminist economics is linked to domestic policy, foreign policy, and trade. And it's not just the arms trade, it's all trade. You know, the price of grain actually affects and causes wars. And those are things that we have to look out for. So I'm going to sign off now, but it was lovely to see you all, and apologies I can't stay. Take care.
Absolutely okay. Thank you. Yes, as Taniel reminded us, I think it is impossible to bring all of these points together in 10 minutes or so. So you're all very warmly invited to join in next week and listen to what she has to say in her research in more depth. Okay, so thank you very much, Taniel, again. I will move on to Jenny. Jenny, give me a shout if you can hear us, because Maki has some internet issues. So I'm moving on to you if you're ready.
Oh, okay, yes, that's fine. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you just fine. So Jenny will be speaking to us about the work that Wilpf does on the Wilpf UK does on the environment, and that we do in the XR Peace Council. So over to you, Jenny.
Okay, thanks. Well, hello everybody. It's good to talk to you all, and I hope you're getting this. And just want to say that I don't know a great deal about it. I'm sure many of you know more than I do on all sorts of areas of this, and you can help me as much as I hope to be able to help you. Okay, so I'm going to have to read it. It's easier that way. We know that there are many effects that the climate changes are introducing to people's lives, and the weather that we all talk about, with the droughts, and in many countries sometimes followed by the floods, that has gone on for one of the most dramatic effects on food security. The livestock in many countries die from the lack of water and grass to feed on, as there's no water, and there's no water to drink, or not clean water, and for the growth of the grass as well for the animals to feed on. Families have very little food and no food, and not enough water to grow vegetables or to keep the family clean and with fresh water. And in many parts of the world, the women are the ones who have to search for water and carry it long distances, often on their heads, as you've seen on TV. And they're doing this to try and sustain their families and grow vegetables for their families to eat. And it's often a losing battle. And the ones who spend their life worrying about carrying the water are the women. And they do the feeding and the caring and teaching survival skills to their children and try to protect them from hunger and disease. And often the girls are doing the carrying of the water as well, if not, and they are sometimes at risk from being abducted and being raped in their search for water and for wood that they try and burn to cook by. Recently, I heard on the radio about locusts that are devouring crops as they swarm in the massive numbers around the countries bordering the Indian Ocean. I think it was 30 miles wide, which is extraordinary, this massive number of locusts. And the answer so far seems to be to try and spray them at a particular stage in their development. But that has its own problems, and it's led to livestock deaths. And I don't know what effect it has on humans, but you can imagine it's not good, and it's likely that they're at risk too. And the crops that are sprayed by it, when people digest those crops, I don't know. More thinking needs to go into such drastic actions. And as I understand it, this huge swarm is due to climate change. So if the temperature continues to rise, does that mean there'll be more large swarms? I don't know. It's already acknowledged that the variety and number of insects is falling. 70% is the fall that I understand is happening, which is phenomenal. And because insects are very sensitive to climate change, and they can't cope with much of a range. A few years ago, you might remember when you traveled by car, particularly on a long journey, you'd have to stop and wipe your windscreen because it would have dead insects on it when you're driving into them. Now you don't have to. The windscreen is clean, which is scary. How will fertilization of your tomatoes at home happen in your garden? Well, farmers must be wondering this too, as they use various chemicals to enhance the growth of their crops. The use of the pesticides needs to be radically rethought, as damaging the balance of nature has consequences beyond the present, as it is the future we need to think about and keep in mind the generations of humans and all other species to come. It's our responsibility to protect the world and all forms in it, yet in the Western world, we don't. There are solutions, and I don't doubt that women give a huge amount of them through practical ways of working. Water management schemes are possible. Obviously, there's reservoirs, but it takes determination to work out and implement, and often the cooperation between countries regarding water flow is missing. I'm thinking of the situation in Palestine, where the water is withheld from Gaza from them getting sufficient quantities, whilst Israel has plenty. This obviously goes on in other countries, and I don't know all about that, but I know that it does go on. Often corruption prevents useful schemes from being implemented, as governments rule for their own benefit and ignore the future of their own citizens. As the climate changes and the deluge or droughts increase, some islands in the Pacific will be submerged, which is in the early stages already. Where will the residents go? Will other countries become kind-hearted and take them in? If the governments of the world really took the climate change seriously and cooperated with each other, as they've said they will, but show very limited signs of doing, then the overall rising temperatures could be slowed and reduced. But it would take cooperation and determination rather than protectionism and military action. The lack of resources such as electricity causes the women to go in search of firewood for cooking, which are often collected by the younger girls, as I was saying earlier. Instead of receiving an education, they're doing the heavy work and putting their own lives at risk. Yet this is in places where there's lots of sunshine. Why are the governments not setting up solar panels to serve both the city and the rural communities where there's space to harness this free resource? Again, it's the willpower that's missing, as the governments would often rather spend their money on preparation for war and maintaining the armies rather than sustaining and enhancing the lives of the populations. And of course, it's only women's work, so why worry? Women's cheap labour in developing countries fills the shops with unnecessary fashions for the West, and the cotton cloth that takes many gallons of water to produce that could be used to sustain a decent supply to the citizens instead of feeding the throwaway society that our sort of society demands. Understandably, people leave areas of such difficulties and become refugees, trying to get away from the droughts, the floods, the starvation, the poverty, and the wars that are brought about by enduring greed and the denial of human rights and needs. Governments like ours, to our shame, do their very best to reject them and to keep those refugees and asylum seekers away from our shores, often having exploited the countries where the asylum seekers are coming from. And the West continues to exploit countries like the DRC for their minerals, where the corruption of the foreign-owned companies and warfare go on damaging the lives of the people living there. Human rights continue to be ignored by the greedy few. Yet there are answers to some of these problems. Some technology, along with government determination and shared responsibility. The mining of coal, for example, continues in the full knowledge that it's contributing to climate change. And our government recently agreed to a new coal mine starting up in Cumbria, which is unbelievable since they know about the carbon footprint that will, the carbon release that will make. Oil production too gives rise to the plastic that lands in our seas, in the creatures that live there, causing great pain and suffering. Many of us saw Blue Planet, the Attenborough programs that highlighted this. And the burning of the oil in cars and planes, etc., that pollutes the atmosphere, as we noticed over the last few weeks with the clear air when in lockdown, with much reduced traffic and the quiet that brought about. Using wind power has been very successful, and renewable resources like this is obviously the way to reducing the carbon in the atmosphere. Then there's the effect of the military. The production of weapons uses masses of resources, with ongoing use of oil, materials for weapons to replace the used bombs and artillery, and so on. The making and storing of the world's most stupid weapons, the nuclear bombs that governments are so attached to, with the huge maintenance and replacement costs, is beyond stupid. And of course, needless to say, the use of the particular bombs, these particular bombs, the nuclear ones, would be utterly disastrous, with the possibility of millions of deaths and the wounded being unable to get help, the growing of food due to the contamination of the soil and the weather pattern changes, all amounting to the end of life as we know it. The earth itself cannot fight back, and so we have to state its claim that inflicting such damage is unacceptable. Ray Atchison, a Wilpf woman, has written a brilliant article, and if you haven't read it already, it's in the May Wilpf newsletter that you can have access to if you haven't already. That was from the 30th of May. Even when fighting stops and the rebuilding starts, the resources needed for the transportation and the energy for the concrete, steel, glass and wood has to come from somewhere, and it's finite. Stop the fighting and the need to keep rebuilding, Stop the wars and the people can live in peace. Stop the temperature rising to stop the climate getting out of control. Stop chopping down the forest to keep the carbon in the ground. Stop the military taking control to enable exploitation of the global markets at the cost of human dignity and health and division. The military consumes just ludicrous amounts of money as it contaminates the planet. But the utter immorality of such diversion of funds to preparing to kill rather than look after the human race and the planet is a total disgrace. Women are more degraded, abused and exploited by the occupation and presence of military personnel and by warfare with the long-term harm to their reproductive systems and by their cheap labour to fill the shops with unnecessary fashions in the West. When it comes to post-conflict situations, women's input, as mentioned just now by Taniel, the United Nations 1325 resolution, we've seen little progress on that, and there remains a long way to go before we can get much chance there. Wilpf women, along with others in the peace movement, were involved with the climate change rebellion events in London in October, putting themselves forward as willing to be arrested or as observers of the arrests, or support and liaison with the press and leaflet distribution. XR Peace has been formed of many like-minded groups who recognise the military action and preparations cause an enormous amount of pollution in a variety of ways and continues to contribute to climate change. Wilpf is represented on the XR Peace Council. We were looking at ways to work together and actions to take at the rebellion that should have taken place this month, but obviously it had to be cancelled. However, there are some brilliant leaflets designed by Rebecca Johnson on our website and on the XRP's website too, to mark the days that actions would have been taken. We hope to form a Wilpf affinity group for when the next rebellion is organised. Several women were hoping to take the opportunity to take part, as earlier this year Wilpf members were all offered training to take on the roles of the group. Certainly don't have to be willing to be arrested, as there are lots of other things that need to be done. Observing what the police are doing, welfare of the group, publicity and liaising with other groups, liaising with the press, and just being there. And the training will be useful in other situations as well, such as local XR groups or political actions, or not just where there's a risk of arrest, as it will give you confidence perhaps as well if you need it. And the recently started International Wilpf Environment Group has started now, and we're sharing ideas and information, and we'll be working together to develop more understanding of environmental issues. Wilpf has gained United Nations Environmental Programme status, which, as I understand it, means that we can work at influencing the decisions regarding climate change prevention at the United Nations by working at influencing the delegates. We will have our say. And I have some ideas, a few ideas about actions that women can do, that all of us can do. One is to write to the government about objecting to this coal mine about to be started in Cumbria. Another idea is that writing to your supermarket to ask them to stop wrapping their vegetables in plastic. Campaign for more trees in your area, in parks or on roundabouts if they're suitable, in school playgrounds particularly, so children have better air quality. And find out about local meetings or with XR, and introduce the military, the idea that the military are causing so much pollution. Many of them are aware of it. The more we go on about it, the better. Get a large piece of cardboard and write a message on it, and get someone to take a photograph of you, maybe in front of a well-known landmark if you have one in your area, so that can be put on Twitter or Facebook, or send it to the Wilpf office and maybe we can put it on our website. Save rainwater. Join XRP's affinity group training sessions. And that's it. Okay.
Thank you very much, Jenny. I'll swiftly move on because I'm conscious of time to Maki. Maki, can you hear us? And can we hear you?
I can't hear you, but can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay, great. Okay,
fabulous.
I'm really sorry that my connection has been poor, so I have been in and out. So I'm going to stop my video, but I just wanted to wave.
It's okay because you have the slides.
Like. Yeah.
All right, let me quickly share this with you all.
Okay. Yeah.
Lovely.
Okay,
Maki, the
brilliant.
floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you. So I guess many of you have got extensive knowledge on women, peace and security agenda, but I just want to cover basics so that we have common ground. So as many of you know, the development of women, peace and security agenda is marked by the adoption of Security Council Resolution 1325 on October 31st, 2000. So that means that this is the 20th anniversary of the adoption of this resolution. So this is the first resolution to address the link between peace, women's rights, and gender equality, but this obviously didn't happen in the vacuum. So we need to acknowledge the role of a global women's civil society and the long history of transnational women's peace activism that facilitated this development. And as we heard from Sheila, that obviously this transnational peace activism is not not the late 20th century's phenomena and can trace back to a century ago. And those women who gathered in The Hague in 1915 for the first Wilpf Congress adopted 20 resolutions addressing many points which are similar to Security Council resolution on women, peace and security. And one of the areas is women's representation in policy decision-making, particularly in the area of peace building. Since the adoption of UN Security Council Resolution 1235, 10 further resolutions on women, peace and security have been adopted, and 2 are adopted last year. And these resolutions are further supported by a variety of other normative frameworks within the UN system, and these structures are broader framework of the women, peace and security agenda. And different actors play a role in implementing a women, peace and security agenda, including Security Council and other UN institutions and member states and civil society organizations such as ourselves, like Wilpf, and also NGO working group on women, peace and security. But maybe we can say that UN member states are one of the key players in this implementation. And National Action Plan have been used since 2005 as an instrument to translate this international framework, international legal framework into national and local practice and actions. As of May 2020, 84 member states have developed national action plans on women, peace and security, and some have already updated them 2 or 3 times. And as for UK, it's developed first national action plan in 2006 and currently on 4th version, and which was launched in January 2018. So you can see the front cover of this national action plan. Okay, so can you move to the next slide, please? Okay, so I want to the second one. Yes, thank you. So I want to explain how Wilpf engage with the second slide. Yes, that one. Engage with a women, peace and security agenda internationally. So some of you know that the Wilpf have a semi-permanent women, peace and security program called Peace Women. So this is based in New York office and facilitates monitoring the women, peace and security agenda through the UN system together with other civil society organizations. And also Peace Women maintains the database on national action plans from many countries. And this is really, really great database. And Wilpf also have European network, and where has sections from European countries and also beyond discuss women, peace and security and other campaigns. For example, last year in this network that we jointly developed a statement or letter called Towards a Peaceful Europe in a Peaceful World, encouraging European Parliament candidates to commit to promote gender-sensitive foreign policy once they are elected as members of European Parliament. And in addition, within Wilpf Europe, in 2018 and 19, we undertook this project called Women Vote Peace, and explore the connection between women's suffrage movement and peace activism 100 years ago that Sheila explained, and also trying to link this history with current situation. And as you have seen in Sheila's presentation that we reenacted the 1919 second Wilpf Congress in Zurich. And thirdly, those state parties of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which is often called CEDAW, go through state periodic review. This often happens every 4 years, where the committee of this convention reviews on state progress on eliminating discrimination against women. So with the help of Wilpf International, Wilpf UK, and also other sections involved in this cycle of state periodic review, and submit shadow reports and participate in civil society forum at Geneva. The last UK review took place February 2019, last year. Well, we raised the issue of protecting refugee and asylum-seeking women, and also raised the concern about arms trade, which has detrimental impact on women under Women, Peace and Security agenda. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, sorry, yes, next one. Yeah, thank you. And now I want to look at how we engage Women, Peace and Security agenda nationally. So in addition to our engagement of CEDAW periodic review at UN Geneva, Wilpf UK is also a member of the UK civil society CEDAW network, and we are trying to raise the awareness of how women, peace and security can be considered as women's rights issue. I think for peace activists, this link are something we take for granted, but I was really surprised that when I tried to raise this issue in more general women's organization coalition, people really didn't see this. So I thought it was really important to raise our profile within this kind of UK network. And also we are part of Agenda Action for Peace and Security Network, which is a UK civil society network on women, peace and security. And this often called GAPS. And GAPS works with the government to develop, to help developing a national action plan, and also produce shadow reports on national action plan. And we have plenty of opportunity to contribute to draft shadow reports. Okay, and lastly, Wilpf UK also is a part of a Peace Education Network, and currently producing peace education materials for the secondary school. But unfortunately with COVID-19 and a lot of partners in this network is followed. So actually the process of producing these materials is being sort of paused. But I'm hoping that this will start again once things get better. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so how can what can we do as an individual to be involved in women, peace and security agenda? Okay, I guess many of you are Wilpf UK member, but if you're not, please join. Partly because we need more people to organize our autumn seminar on women, peace and security. At the moment with COVID-19, we don't know what kind of format this event can take place, but we still want to have an event in autumn on women, peace and security. And it would be really great that if we have got more people to be involved in organizing this event. And also, as I said earlier, that we have a lot of opportunity to provide comments and feedback on shadow reports and other reports through GAPS and UK CEDAW network. And we really want to develop capacity in Wilpf UK so that we can make effective intervention in this process. And as I said, I mentioned about peace education materials we are developing for secondary school, but we also have various educational materials developed over the years. So it would be really great to compile these together, and then we might be able to contact schools or maybe even adult education to provide some sessions on peace, gender, peace and war. Okay, next slide, please. Hello, next slide. Yes, thank you. Okay, and also whether you are a member or not, you can still contact your MP, either writing a letter or other forms of lobbying to address the importance of, for example, developing developing inclusive peace strategies. For example, that UK should be responsible to introduce gender balanced representation in peace negotiation or other policy political decision-making processes. And also we can highlight the importance of increasing the UK government's commitment to tackle violence against women and girls, including ratifying what we call Istanbul Convention. So this is a European Convention on Violence Against Women. So there are various things that we can do to promote this women, peace and security agenda. But we will discuss more on how to write a letter to your MPs and how to lobby MPs concerning women, peace and security in the session on 30th of June. So this will be the second session. So please do join, and all are welcome. Okay, thank you. And we also have got resources. Sorry, next slide, please. Yes, okay, thank you. Yes, so these are resources in relation to women, peace and security, and hopefully this can be shared in various ways. So I hope that this will be useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maki. Yes, I will leave this up for a moment if anyone wants to take a screenshot, but also this slide pack will also be put up on the website, so you'll be able to access all of these resources. I am aware that we are over the allotted amount of time, but I would like to ask Emily if she could share sort of some questions for the audience, and if you have to go, completely understandable. Thank you for joining us. So Emily, over to you for some questions.
Hello. So actually all of the questions came from Courtney. So I'm not sure if you want to take the floor. I note that you have 2 for Sheila and only 1 for Maki. Oh, no, 2 for Maki, sorry. So I'm not sure if you want to take that away, Courtney.
Courtney. Do we still have Courtney?
I think so.
Courtney
I'm just going to try
Graff.
and...
Oh.
I'm trying to unmute, but I can't seem to.
Oh, there you go. Here she is. Hello.
Hello. Apologies for all of the questions. I'm actually using Wilpf as a case study for my master's dissertation, which is why I continue to ask so many in the chat and kind of dominated it a bit. So thank you so much for the accommodation and the kindness. Yeah, so I have 2 questions for Sheila and 2 questions for Maki, and thank you everyone for being here. It's been very informative. To Sheila, how has Wilpf's institutional culture evolved over time to accommodate for shifting international conditions and concerns?
Is that the only question you have for Sheila?
Oh, and the other one's kind of related.
Okay, go for it.
1 second. Sorry, there's just so many. I didn't really expect to be called out like this.
Oh, I'm so sorry. No, we're happy to.
Okay, it's okay. Sorry.
Sorry, I
Something-
missed the first one.
Oh, it's okay. I just asked, how has Wilpf's institutional culture evolved over time to accommodate for shifting international conditions and concerns? And then my second one was just a refocusing, asking how has Wilpf's constant engagement either with the League of Nations and later with the United Nations influenced the way that it formulated itself as an institution?
Well, 100 years, 105 years is a long time, and so there have been a number of developments. I think at the beginning we hung on in there with the League of Nations, although it soon showed itself not to be a particularly good forum. We've been very keen to use all the facilities of the United Nations, and as I made a point, and of course it's been carried on by Maki, that when 1325 United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 was passed, it was because of the impetus of the NGOs, and Wilpf was right at the front of that. We've always had a critique of the United Nations, the sort of critique that many organizations and countries have had, that the old hierarchy of 1945, which gave the 5 Security Council countries all that power, should change and so on. But we stay at the United Nations and we use that forum, and we again were very, very active in the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons at the United Nations. And once again, NGOs were a very strong element there. So we belong to the culture that these systems like the United Nations are ones that NGOs should engage with, should use to the utmost of our ability, even though we know they're flawed and we critique them, and for instance the nature of the Security Council and who it gives power to so strongly. Does that go somewhere to answer your question? Say
No,
else?
definitely. Yeah. No, that's fantastic. Thank you.
Okay.
I guess.
Thank you very much. Would you mind sharing the other question with us as well?
Oh yes, for Maki. Or you mean question number 2? I just tried to
no. Questions for Maki. Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
How would you characterize Wilpf's relationship with the UNSC concerning the WPS agenda? And then has this increased engagement influenced how Wilpf prioritizes its goals and campaigns?
It's a sorry. Yeah, it's a quite difficult questions to answer. But so I think I will answer. My answer might not be the representative of Wilpf's view, but this is what I see as being involved in Wilpf's activities. So basically, as you know, everyone said that Wilpf have long history of addressing the connection between gender equality and peace and war. So I think this has been always a priority, but I think the uniqueness of Wilpf's approach is, I think what is happening at the moment in terms of WPS agenda is there's a slightly unwelcoming move that making war safe for women rather than disarmaments and also anti-militarism. So I think Wilpf has been, I think, strengthening its position that we always, so obviously, you know, we need to address, you know, gender perspective in security, but it's not to make war safe for women, but actually the ultimate goal is disarmament and the permanent peace. So I think that's where Wilpf's goals still lies and also has been strengthened.
Thank you, Maki. Does that answer your question, Courtney?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, very best of luck with your dissertation. If there are any other questions and someone would like to take the floor, please do so. As the saying goes, speak now or forever hold your peace, until next week at least. If not, oh, Maria. So Maria O'Reilly asks, in the UK, women, peace and security often gets connected to foreign policy, international development, etc., with issues concerning women put outside of the UK. Very true. Can we use the women, peace and security agenda to help the feminist movement in the UK? Oh, sorry. I do have an answer for that, but I would give the floor to our speakers before I speak. So if any of our speakers wants to take that.
Okay, so maybe Cecilia can also like
Sorry, Maki. Maki, we cannot hear you.
At what I say, but I mean, obviously, one of the problem of women, peace and security, and also national action plan in a country like it's a national action plan is. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So one of the problem of women, peace and security agenda sort of applied in UK context through national action plan is national action plan is very forward looking, the outward looking. So basically, only addresses a women, peace and security issue outside UK. So one of the criticisms has been they never addressed the issue of Northern Islands, and also like people who are arriving from as a refugee and asylum seekers. So, but at the same time, from activist and academic point of view, this is still possible that we really can use women, peace and security, and also we should use national action plan to address feminist movement in the UK, so that everyone who are living in the UK should be covered by women, peace and security agenda. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Maki. And I think one of the biggest accomplishments to that effect is the Scottish National Action Plan, which is one of the, well, I think the first National Action Plan of a devolved government in the UK. And that really aims to address the issues around conflict, around violence, around women's participation in peace processes, both in Scotland and abroad, but with a strong focus of Scotland. And I think that links quite well with our campaign on disarmament, being that Scotland is our harbor of nuclear weapons in this country. So that is, I think, a good example of what's already being done. But absolutely, I think the effects of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda National Action Plan in this country has been very much outward facing, and that is if, as Maki has said, we are part of GAPS, and if you have a look at the report that GAPS has put out after the National Action Plan had been published, it quite critically assesses the need to look inwards as well, whether it is addressing the needs of asylum seekers and refugee women who are still not citizens, but also the citizens of this country, Northern Ireland, as Maki pointed out, being one of the examples. So that there is, if you're also looking for research, that is an area in which research is much needed. I'm personally quite preoccupied with the recent, or actually just from yesterday, the merger of BIFID and FCO, because that merger will highly impact the way in which we perceive what the Women, Peace and Security Agenda should do, and also the way that we implement it both at home and abroad, because it will become essentially another securitized way of doing development, which is not what the Women, Peace and Security Agenda should be. So that is tune in again next week for more on this. But thank you very much for raising that issue. We have one more question. Oh, sorry, Sheila, go for it.
I was going to say that it would be a really important thing for Wilpf to make some level of campaigning on this, bringing together the Foreign Commonwealth Office and DFID, because it impacts on so many areas of Wilpf's work. So I'd like to flag that as something for us to think of as an action. Absolutely.
So if anyone wants to join in on that campaign, I think, yeah, we're all pretty mad about that, and rightfully so. Quite concerned, really. The last question I have here is from Mariam. How Wilpf is going to support women from Darfur by adopting 1325 National Action Plan, as there is a peace agreement going to be signed in Juba, South Sudan, later this month. I don't know if I am not sure what the Wilpf International strategy is on that front. I don't know if any of the other speakers do. Am I receiving any feedback on that? I think, Mariam, that is a brilliant question. I personally think that the best place to direct that question is Wilpf International. And I can help you do that by just putting you in contact with the International Secretariat. So I do have your email, Mariam, so I'll just connect the two dots, that's okay. Because I don't think I have an answer, but if anyone else does, please, again, speak up. No, okay. Wonderful. Okay, I think we have definitely run over time, but this was a brilliant conversation. And again, it's so invigorating to have that at the end of the day. So thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you to you, the audience, and the members for being here and for joining us. I would like to remind you that this was just the first of a series of events. The next one will be next week with Taniel, and then the week after with Maki, and the week after that with Jenny. I will be sending reminders, so again, look out for emails. They will also not be standalone speakers in that event. We're trying to get other panelists, so watch out for that information. Hopefully, we will be sending it out soon. One interesting piece of news today on our website, we have launched a questionnaire, which is the initial part of a bigger research that volunteers at Wilpf are doing on the impact of COVID on women globally. So I will be sharing that again. We will be sharing that on social media. It's on our website. We'll be sharing that with members. Please do fill it and spread it as wide as possible. We're trying to get a truly global perspective on this. So really, we really appreciate if you could spread it as much as possible. Maki, I've got your message. Please do speak now again.
Okay, can you hear me? So before we close, can we all say big thank you to Cecilia for fantastic organization and chairing and facilitating, well, basically everything to make this event happen. So we can just wave or clap or, you know, virtually to give a big thanks to Cecilia. Thank you so much, Cecilia.
Of course, anytime. As I said, we need to bring this these campaigns close to everyone's hearts, and these are all in our feminist hearts. So we really want to share that with as many people as possible. Thank you very much for joining. We hope to see you next week, and thank you. Have a lovely evening, everyone. And hopefully enjoy the sun if it's coming out. Bye to everyone. Thank you very much.
Bye, 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 bye.